The word worthless didn't land like an insult. It landed like a verdict. My father said it over Sunday pot roast, casually dismantling 33 years of my life while reaching for the salt. The silence at the table was suffocating, thick with pity I didn't want. I thought that moment was the end of my world, but when the senator called the next morning, I realized it was just the opening argument. The engine of my sedan was off, but I sat in the driveway for another 10 minutes, listening to the ticking sound of the cooling metal. The house in front of me was a sprawling colonial revival that had needed a fresh coat of paint since I was in high school. Yet my father, Hank Coleman, refused to hire anyone to do it. He claimed he would get to it when the weather held, but the weather in our coastal city was as temperamental as he was. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. 33 years old. I looked tired. The concealer under my eyes was doing heavy lifting, trying to hide the fact that I had been up until 2 in the morning auditing a healthcare provider's billing cycles. I rehearsed my lines for the 20th time that afternoon. "Hello, Dad. The traffic was terrible on the bridge. Yes, work is fine. Steady. No, I am not seeing anyone special. Simple, neutral, defensible. I hated that I needed a script to enter my childhood home. I hated that my stomach churned with a specific, acidic anxiety that I had never quite outgrown. A phantom reflex from years of walking on eggshells. But weeks had passed since the last Sunday dinner, and the guilt had started to curdle into obligation. If I did not go, the narrative would shift. I would become the ungrateful daughter again, the one who thought she was too good for the family table. I grabbed a bottle of wine from the passenger seat, a Cabernet I knew he would criticize for being too oaky or not oaky enough, and stepped out into the humid air. The front door was unlocked. It always was. Hank Coleman believed locks were for people who had something to fear, and he feared nothing, or at least that was the brand he sold. I walked down the hallway, the floorboards creaking in the exact spots they had creaked when I was 12. The smell hit me first. Roast beef, heavy with onion powder, and the stale, underlying scent of old carpet and lemon polish. It was the smell of a house that had stopped evolving the day my mother died. "Hazel, you actually made it," the voice boomed from the living room. Hank was sitting in his recliner, a tumbler of whiskey balanced on the armrest. He did not get up. He was 62 but looked older, his face weathered by years of construction sites and chronic dissatisfaction. I walked in and offered a tight smile. "Hi, Dad?" Traffic was heavy on the bridge. He grunted, his eyes already drifting back to the television where a golf tournament was playing at low volume. Traffic is always heavy on the bridge. "Hazel, that is why smart people leave early." I placed the wine on the side table. "I brought this." He glanced at the label and gave a short, dismissive sniff. "Put it in the kitchen. Your aunt is already fussing over the gravy." The dining room was crowded. It was not just family tonight. It was the extended network of people Hank liked to keep in his orbit. Neighbors who owed him favors. A couple of guys from the contracting firm. And Aunt Linda, who was technically his cousin but acted as the family matriarch whenever she could. And there was Luke, my younger brother, standing by the sideboard, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Luke was 28 and the golden boy, solely because he worked with his hands. He was a foreman at Hank's company, Coleman Contracting, a job he did with competence but without joy. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped an inch, the tension releasing slightly. "Hey, Hayes," he said, coming over to give me a quick, one-armed hug. "You look good. You are a bad liar." I whispered. He grinned. "Just survive until dessert. Linda made that lemon tart you like." We sat down. The seating arrangement was unspoken but rigid. Hank at the head, Luke to his right, me to his left, and the guests filling in the rest. The conversation started with the usual localized complaints: property taxes, the pothole on Elm Street that the city still had not filled, the price of lumber. I focused on my plate, cutting my roast beef into precise, manageable squares. I was a compliance analyst. My entire life was about precision, about ensuring that things fit into the boxes where they belonged. I found comfort in rules because rules were predictable. People like Hank were not. So, Hazel, a neighbor named Mr., Henderson said, leaning forward. His fork pointed at me like an accusation. I saw your name in the Gazette last week. Something about healthcare compliance standards? My spine stiffened. It was a dry industry article I had been interviewed for, a 500-word piece on new privacy regulations. Yes, I said, keeping my voice level. It was just a short quote about the new federal guidelines for patient data. Hank let out a sharp, barking laugh from the head of the table. Federal guidelines, he mocked, shaking his head as he poured himself more wine. That is a fancy way of saying she pushes paper around to make sure doctors cannot do their jobs. I kept cutting my meat. It is about patient protection. Dad, making sure medical records are secure. It is about bureaucracy, he countered, his voice rising just enough to command the room. That is what Hazel does. She is a professional red tape dispenser, a glorified tattletale. The table went quiet. This was the ritual, the undermining. He needed to remind everyone that my white-collar career, the one I had built with student loans and 80-hour weeks, was frivolous compared to the concrete and steel of his world. Luke tried to intervene. Come on, Dad. She is good at it. It is a senior analyst position. Hank waved a hand, dismissing Luke's defense. It is not real work. Luke, you know what real work is. You were out there on the harbor project last week in the rain. That is building something. That is leaving a mark. Hazel just checks boxes to make sure nobody gets sued. The heat rose in my neck. A familiar, suffocating flush. I gripped my fork until my knuckles turned white. It pays the mortgage, I said quietly. Hank's eyes narrowed. He hated when I spoke back, even mildly. Pays the mortgage, he repeated. You treat that job like it is saving the world. You know what Henderson here was telling me? He said he needs a permit just to build a deck now. Because of people like you, I am not in municipal zoning. Dad, I work in healthcare. Same difference. It is all people who cannot do. So they regulate. He looked around the table, seeking validation. The guests offered polite, uncomfortable smiles, looking down at their potatoes. They knew the price of a free dinner was serving as an audience for Hank's grievances. I took a sip of water, telling myself to breathe, count to 10, do not engage, the script, stick to the script. But Mr. Henderson, perhaps trying to be helpful, perhaps just oblivious, spoke up again. Well, the article made you sound very important. Hazel, it said you caught a discrepancy that saved the hospital nearly $100,000. It was the wrong thing to say. Hank did not like hearing that I was important. He did not like hearing that I had value outside of his permission. He slammed his glass down. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. Important? He sneered. You think catching a clerical error makes someone important? He looked directly at me then, his eyes glazed with alcohol and a deep, simmering resentment that went back decades. Back to a mother who tried to leave him and a daughter who looked just like her. She is worthless, he said. The word hung in the air, vibrating. He did not shout it. He said it with a cold, flat certainty. She comes here, drinks my wine, sits at my table, and acts like she is better than the people who built this town. But you take away that computer and that little badge, and what is she? Worthless. Someone laughed. It was a short, nervous sound, likely from one of the younger guys from the crew. A reflex to break the unbearable tension. But it felt like a slap. I stopped breathing. The room blurred at the edges. I looked at Luke. He was staring at his plate, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. But he said nothing. He never said anything. He had to work with Hank tomorrow. He had to survive. I placed my napkin on the table. I stood up. My legs felt numb. Distant. I think I'm going to go, I said. My voice sounded remarkably steady, which was a miracle. Sit down. Hazel, Hank said. We are not done eating. I am done. I said. I walked out of the dining room. I could feel his eyes on my back, burning. I could hear him muttering to the table as I grabbed my purse. So dramatic. Always so dramatic. Just like her mother. I made it to the car before I started shaking. I sat in the dark driver's seat, my hands trembling so violently I could not get the key into the ignition. The word echoed in the small space, worthless. It wasn't just an insult, it was a diagnosis. He had been making it since I was 6 years old. Every time I cried, every time I failed a math test, every time I chose a book over a wrench. I closed my eyes and forced myself to inhale. 1, 2, 3. I am a senior compliance analyst at Veracity Health. I own my apartment. I have a credit score of 780. I am not worthless, but the facts felt thin against the weight of his voice. His contempt did not feel like an opinion. It felt like a verdict from a judge who knew all my secret flaws. I drove home in silence, the radio off, the city lights smearing into long streaks of neon. I did not cry. I had learned a long time ago that crying only gave him more evidence. The next morning, the alarm went off at 6 o'clock. I woke up with a headache that sat behind my eyes like a bruised fruit. Sunday night hovered over me, a gray cloud, but I got up, I showered, I put on my navy blazer and the pearls I bought myself for my 30th birthday, armor. I was pouring my second cup of coffee in the break room when my phone buzzed. Unknown caller. I usually let those go to voicemail. I assumed it was a telemarketer or a scammer trying to sell me an extended car warranty, but something made me answer. Maybe it was the lingering adrenaline from the night before, a sense that the world was already off its axis. "This is Hazel," I answered. "Ms. Coleman?" The voice was female, polished, authoritative but warm. It sounded like the voice of a woman who wore expensive suits and never apologized for taking up space. "Yes? This is Andrea Vance, Chief of Staff for Senator Clara Whitfield." I froze, the coffee cup halfway to my mouth. Senator Whitfield was a household name in our state. A formidable woman who ran on anti-corruption platforms and had a reputation for shredding witnesses in committee hearings. I almost laughed. It had to be a prank. Luke's friends had a terrible sense of humor. "Okay," I said, my tone skeptical. "Look, I am really busy right now. So if this is... The senator would like to meet with you, Ms. Coleman, today, if possible. Privately." The skepticism wavered. The voice was too professional, the cadence too precise to be one of Luke's buddies faking an accent. "Meet with me? Why?" "I work in healthcare compliance. I think you have the wrong person." "No, Ms. Coleman, we have the right person." The senator specifically asked for Hazel Coleman, daughter of Henry Coleman. My father's name made the air leave my lungs. "Why?" I asked again, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I cannot discuss the details over the phone, but the senator stressed that this is a matter of significant urgency, and confidentiality is paramount. Can you come to the chaotic office on 4th Street? The one above the bakery? We maintain a quiet workspace there." I stared at the break room wall, at a flyer for a mandatory fire safety seminar. "Is this about my father? We can discuss it when you arrive. 12 o'clock? I looked at my watch. "Okay, yes, 12 o'clock. The line clicked dead. I walked back to my desk in a daze. My cubicle was in the center of the floor, surrounded by the low hum of computer fans and the murmur of other analysts. I sat down and unlocked my screen. Senator Whitfield, my father, worthless. The words swirled together, creating a pattern I could not quite see. I tried to focus on my work. I had a queue of internal audits to review. I opened the shared drive, the repository where we kept years of compliance logs, vendor contracts, and risk assessments. I was looking for a file from last month, a routine check on a surgical supply vendor. I navigated to the archive folder. That was when I saw it. In the access logs, which usually showed a boring stream of my own username and my manager's, there was a flag. User, admin_root. Time, 3:14 a.m. File, accessed/archive/publicworks/legacy_audits/2019. I frowned. We were a healthcare company. Why did we have a folder labeled Public Works? And why was someone accessing legacy audits at 3 in the morning? I clicked on the folder path. It was buried deep, inside a directory that was supposed to be for retired assets. I opened the folder. Inside were PDFs of vendor audits from 6 years ago. I opened one at random. It was a scan of a compliance review for a concrete pour at a city hospital expansion. Standard stuff. But as I scrolled down, I saw the contractor listed. Coleman Contracting. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked the next file. Another project. A parking garage for the medical center. Contractor. Coleman. Contracting. Someone had been looking at my father's old contracts in the middle of the night, on my company's server. I looked around the office. Everyone looked normal. Dave was eating a bagel. Sarah was typing furiously. But the sense of safety I usually felt in this grid of gray fabric walls was gone. The digital footprint on my screen felt like a muddy boot print on a clean floor. My desk phone rang, making me jump. Hello? Ms. Coleman? This is the manager at Safekeep Storage. The morning was becoming a cascade of interruptions. Safekeep was where my mother's things were. When she died 4 years ago, Hank had wanted to throw everything out. He said holding on to the past was weak. I had salvaged what I could. Her books, her recipe binder, boxes of tax returns she had meticulously kept, photo albums, and rented a unit on the other side of town. I paid for it in cash every month so Hank would not see the charge on any shared statements. Yes, this is Hazel. Hi, look, I am calling because we have a flag on your account for a move-out, but the system is showing a balance credit. I just wanted to confirm where to send the refund check. I gripped the phone cord. Move out? I did not request a move out. There was a pause on the other end. The sound of keys clacking. That is strange. My log shows the unit was accessed and cleared yesterday. The authorization code was used. Cleared? What do you mean, cleared? Empty. Ms. Coleman, the notes say the contents were removed. My stomach dropped. Who removed them? The notes just say authorized entry. The person had the key and the gate code. I felt a cold sweat prickle on my hairline. Only 2 people had the gate code. Me and my mother. Before she died, I had never given it to Hank. I had never given it to Luke. Do not close the account, I said, my voice rising. Do not send a check. I am coming down there. I hung up. I grabbed my purse. I did not care that I had a meeting with my boss in an hour. I did not care about the audit queue. As I walked to the elevator, my cell phone buzzed again. A text message. Dad. I stared at the screen, dread coiling in my gut. Hank never texted. He thought texting was for teenagers and cowards. If he wanted you, he called you so he could interrupt you. I opened the message. Dinner got out of hand. That was it. No, I'm sorry. No, I shouldn't have said that. Just a passive description of the event, as if the dinner had decided to become unpleasant on its own, absolving him of responsibility. Then a second message bubbled up. Come by the house tonight, alone. We need to talk about some papers. The tone was not conciliatory. It was urgent. It was the tone of a foreman barking an order at a subordinate who had screwed up a pour. It was control. I did not reply. I drove to the storage facility like I was fleeing a crime scene. Safekeep was a sprawling complex of corrugated metal rows surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It was supposed to be secure. I parked in front of Unit 402. My hands were shaking again, just like they had in the driveway the night before. I got out and marched to the roll-up door. The padlock was there. My padlock. I dialed the combination. It clicked open. I threw the door up. The metal rattled loudly, echoing down the concrete alley. I stood there, staring into the gloom. It wasn't empty. Not completely. The boxes of books were there. The old armchair with the velvet upholstery was there. The lamp with the fringe shade. But the metal shelving unit against the back wall, the one where I kept the banker's boxes of financial records, the boring, meticulous paperwork my mother had insisted on keeping, was disturbed. I walked in. The air smelled of dry dust and cardboard. I looked at the shelf. There had been 5 boxes there, labeled by year. One was missing. The shelf where the box for the year 1999 had been was empty. But it wasn't just empty. I ran my finger along the metal. The dust was scraped clean. Someone had dragged the box out recently. The rectangle of clean metal was bright against the gray grime. I looked around the unit. Nothing else had been touched. No one had rifled through the jewelry box or taken the antique clock. Someone had come here with a key. Someone had bypassed the security code. And they had come for a single box of 27-year-old tax documents and receipts. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from Hank. "Do not make me come find you. Hazel." I stood in the silence of my dead mother's archive, the dust motes dancing in the slice of sunlight from the open door. I thought about the senator. I thought about the access logs at work. I thought about the word worthless. My father was wrong. If people were breaking into storage units and hacking servers to find traces of my family, I wasn't worthless. I was dangerous. I pulled down the roll-up door and locked it. I did not go to Hank's house. I got in my car and turned toward 4th Street, toward the bakery and the senator. If there was a story being written about me, I was done letting Hank Coleman hold the pen. I put the car in drive. One specific box, 1999. The year the city built the new harbor tunnel. The year Coleman Contracting went from a small crew to a major player. I remembered that year. I was 7. I remembered my mother crying at the kitchen table while Hank shouted about overhead and partners. I merged onto the highway. The fear was still there, sitting heavy in my chest. But something else was growing beside it. A cold, sharp curiosity. I was a compliance analyst. Finding the things people tried to hide was not just my job. It was the only way I knew how to survive. I checked the time, 11:45. I would not be late. I parked 3 blocks away from the address the chief of staff had given me. I double-checked the mirror. I looked professional. I looked like a woman who handled audits, not a woman whose father thought she was a waste of space. The building was nondescript, brick, with a bakery on the ground floor filling the street with the smell of yeast and sugar. A small brass plaque next to a side door read, "CW Consulting." I buzzed. The door buzzed back immediately. I walked up a flight of narrow stairs. At the top, a woman was waiting. She was younger than I expected, maybe my age, with sharp glasses and hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "Ms. Coleman?" "Yes, I am Andrea. Thank you for coming." She led me down a hallway lined with filing cabinets. There were no campaign posters, no flags, just the hum of a shredder somewhere in the back and the low murmur of phones. She opened a door at the end of the hall. "Hazel, come in." Senator Clara Whitfield stood up from behind a desk that was cluttered with stacks of paper. She was shorter than she looked on television, but she took up more room. She wore a blazer the color of steel. She didn't smile. She looked at me with an intensity that made me want to check my own reflection to see what she was seeing. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "Senator," I said, relying on the script. She waved a hand, dismissing the pleasantry. "Sit down. Hazel, we don't have much time." I sat. "You are wondering why I called you?" She said. "I am." She picked up a folder from her desk. It was red. "My committee is looking into some irregularities in municipal contracting. Specifically, regarding the harbor project and the subsequent maintenance bids." My throat went dry. That was a long time ago. "Senator, corruption doesn't have an expiration date. Hazel, it just compounds interest." She opened the folder. "We found a compliance memo. It was used to authorize a payment of $3 million to a subcontractor that does not exist. The memo signed off on the due diligence. It said the company was vetted." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. I looked at it. It was a standard internal review form. It looked like thousands I had filled out in my life. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was my signature, Hazel Coleman. But the date next to it was 5 years ago. I stared at the ink. It looked like my hand. The loop of the H. The sharp Z. "I did not sign this." I whispered. "Are you sure?" Whitfield asked. Her voice was not accusing. It was testing. "I am sure. How can you be sure? It looks authentic." I looked up at her. "Because 5 years ago, on that date, I was in the hospital. I had my appendix out. I was on medical leave for 2 weeks. I wasn't signing memos. I wasn't even checking email. Whitfield stared at me for a long beat. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Good," she said. "That is what I hoped you would say." She leaned forward. "Someone stole your identity. Hazel. They used your credibility, your name, your reputation as the girl who follows the rules, to wash dirty money through the city's books. And I think we both know who had access to your old files. I thought of the empty shelf in the storage unit. I thought of the access logs. My father." I said. Whitfield didn't answer. She didn't have to. "We need to find out how deep this goes," she said, "and I need you to help me." My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. But I knew who it was. Hank. I looked at the senator. I looked at the forged signature. I remembered the dinner, the laughter, the way he looked at me like I was nothing. "What do I have to do?" I asked. Whitfield finally smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a general who had just found a new weapon. "You have to go back to dinner. Hazel. And you have to listen." I nodded. I could do that. I had been listening to Hank Coleman lie my entire life. I stood up. "I will help you," I said. "But not for you." Whitfield raised an eyebrow. "Then for who?" "For the girl he called worthless," I said. I turned and walked out of the office. The air outside felt different, sharper. The game had changed. I wasn't just the audience anymore. I was a player, and I knew the rules better than any of them. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Hank. I didn't call back. I got in my car and drove toward the storage unit again. I needed to see the empty space one more time. I needed to remember exactly what was missing. Because whatever was in that box was enough to make my father afraid. And if he was afraid, he was vulnerable. I pulled onto the highway, the city skyline rising ahead of me like a set of jagged teeth. Let's see who is worthless now. Dad. The text message notification chimed again. Stop digging. It wasn't from Hank. It was from a number I didn't know. I stared at the words. I put the phone in the cup holder and pressed my foot down on the accelerator. I wasn't digging. I was just getting started. The office suite was quieter than a library and smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. It was not the kind of place where laws were made. It was the kind of place where deals were buried. I sat in a high-backed leather chair that felt too large for me. My hands folded in my lap to hide the fact that my cuticles were picked raw. Senator Clara Whitfield sat across from me, up close, without the softening filter of television cameras. She was more imposing. Her skin was tired, etched with the fine lines of a woman who spent 18 hours a day calculating leverage, but her eyes were alert. They were predatory, but warm, like a lioness looking at a cub she intended to adopt, or perhaps eat. Thank you for coming. Hazel, she said. Her voice was low, intimate. She did not speak like a politician giving a stump speech. She spoke like an old friend sharing a secret. I nodded, my throat tight. You said this was about my father. I said. Whitfield folded her hands on the desk. There were no campaign buttons, no flags, no framed photos of her shaking hands with presidents, just stacks of manila folders and a single, pristine laptop. It is about your father, she said, but it is also about you. She opened the red folder in front of her. The sound of the paper sliding against the cardboard was loud in the silence. My committee is currently looking into a series of municipal bids from 5 years ago, she began. We are investigating a pattern of bid rigging involving city infrastructure projects. The deeper we dig, the more we find that the actual work was secondary to the flow of money. The funds were routed through what we call consulting intermediaries. I frowned. Consulting intermediaries? Shell companies. Hazel. Firms that exist only on paper to absorb cash and vanish. They bill for services that are never rendered. Feasibility studies. Compliance reviews, safety audits. She pulled a document from the folder and slid it across the mahogany surface. It was a photocopy, grainy but legible. This is a compliance memo authorizing the release of $2 million to a company called North Shore Logistics for a site safety assessment on the Harbor Tunnel repair project. I looked at the paper. It was a standard form, the kind I had seen thousands of times in my career. rows of checkboxes. A paragraph of boilerplate text confirming that the vendor had been vetted and met all state regulatory standards, and at the bottom, a signature, Hazel Coleman. My stomach turned over, a slow, sickening rotation. I stared at the signature. It was my handwriting. The loops were right. The slant was right. It was the signature I had practiced in high school, the one I used on my mortgage, my driver's license, my employee ID. But I had never seen this document before. I did not sign this. I said, my voice sounded small, thin. Whitfield watched me. She did not look surprised. She looked like she was waiting for me to catch up to a conclusion she had reached days ago. Are you sure? She asked. I am absolutely sure. I work in healthcare compliance. Senator, I have never audited a municipal infrastructure project. I do not even have the clearance for city public works. Whitfield tapped the date on the document with a manicured fingernail. August 12th, 2021. The date hit me like a physical blow. The memory washed over me. The smell of antiseptic, the beep of monitors, the haze of morphine. I couldn't have signed this, I said, the realization sharpening my voice. On August 12th of that year, I was in the surgical recovery wing at St. Jude's. I had a ruptured appendix. I was on medical leave for 3 weeks. I couldn't even sit up, let alone review a compliance dossier for a tunnel project. Whitfield nodded slowly. She reached into the folder again and pulled out a second sheet of paper. I know, she said. We pulled your hospital admission records this morning. I stared at her. The violation of it, a stranger pulling my medical history, stung. But it was eclipsed by the larger horror. Then you know I didn't do it. I know you didn't physically sign it, Whitfield said. But someone who had access to your personnel file, someone who had samples of your signature and knew you were incapacitated and unable to monitor your accounts, used your identity to sanitize this procurement file. They needed a name that looked respectable, a name with a clean record, a compliance analyst with no history of disciplinary action. She leaned forward. They stole your integrity. Hazel, they used your good name to whitewash a crime. And because your name is on the line. If this investigation goes public without your cooperation, the narrative will not be that you were a victim. The narrative will be that you were a participant. I felt the blood drain from my face. Who? I asked. Who would do that? But I already knew the answer. The question was a formality. Who had access to my files? Who knew exactly when I was in the hospital? Who needed a compliance officer to sign off on a shady deal involving the harbor tunnel? Whitfield watched me process it. She let the silence stretch, heavy and unbearable. We believe the forgery was facilitated by someone inside Coleman Contracting, she said softly. Someone who needed to clear a roadblock so the money could flow. My father. I said the word, but no sound came out. It was just a shape my mouth made. Whitfield sat back. I am giving you a chance to clear your name. Hazel, I do not want to destroy you. I want the system that did this, but I need you to help me trace how this memo got into the city's database. I need to know where the original is. I stood up. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. I have to go. I said, Hazel, Whitfield said, her voice sharpening. If you walk out of here without a plan, you are walking into the line of fire. These people, the ones who used you, they are not going to protect you just because you share a last name. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I turned and walked out of the office, down the hallway that smelled of shredder dust, and down the narrow stairs. I burst out onto the street, gasping for air. The humidity of the coastal afternoon hit me like a wet blanket. The world looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. Cars driving by, people walking dogs, the bakery smelling of sugar. But it felt completely alien. I was walking through a landscape that had been mined without my knowledge. I walked 3 blocks to where I had parked my car. I needed to get to the safety of my own space. I needed to think. I saw my sedan parked under the shade of an oak tree. As I approached, I saw something bright on the windshield. It was not a parking ticket. It was too small, too neon, a sticky note. I stopped 10 feet away. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked around the street. It was empty of anyone suspicious. Just a woman pushing a stroller and a delivery truck idling at the corner. I stepped closer and pulled the note off the glass. It was a standard, yellow square of paper, the kind you buy in packs of 500 at an office supply store. Written on it, in thick black marker, were 2 words, "Quit digging." The handwriting was blocky, almost childish. It looked like someone had written it with their non-dominant hand to disguise the style. I stared at it. It was such a small thing, a piece of paper that weighed nothing, but it felt heavy in my hand. It meant they were watching. It meant they weren't just hacking servers or looking at digital logs. Someone had been here. Someone had stood next to my car, perhaps while I was sitting in Whitfield's office, and placed this here. They knew where I was. They knew who I was meeting. A text message was one thing. A digital threat could be sent from anywhere in the world. But a sticky note meant physical proximity. It meant they could reach out and touch me. I crumpled the note in my fist and got into the car. I locked the doors instantly. I checked the back seat. Empty. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, the crumpled yellow ball burning in my palm. Last warning. No, I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to stop. I was going to find out who held the shovel. I drove straight to the Veracity Health corporate campus. It was a glass and steel fortress that had always felt safe to me. It was a place of rules, of badges, of clear hierarchies, but as I walked through the automatic doors, the cool air conditioning felt less like relief and more like the chill of a morgue. I didn't go to my cubicle. I went straight to the corner office. Mr. Sterling, my director, was eating a salad at his desk. He was a man who prided himself on minimizing risk. He wore beige cardigans and spoke in soft, measured tones. He looked up as I walked in and closed the door behind me. I didn't sit down. "Hazel," he said. A piece of lettuce balanced precariously on his plastic fork. "Is everything all right? You look pale." I pulled out my phone. I had taken a picture of the access logs before I left the office that morning. I pulled it up on the screen and thrust it toward him. Why was the administrator account accessing archived vendor audits at 3 a.m? I asked. Sterling blinked. He put the fork down slowly. "Excuse me?" "The logs," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Someone used the root access to open files on Coleman Contracting, files that are 5 years old, files that have nothing to do with our current healthcare contracts. Who did that? Mr. Sterling?" He looked at the phone screen, then at me. His face, usually flushed with high blood pressure, went the color of old paste. He stood up and walked to the blinds. He twisted the plastic wand, shutting out the view of the bullpen. "Hazel," he said, keeping his back to me, "you are a very good analyst. You are thorough." "That is not an answer." He turned around. He looked tired. Suddenly, he looked very small in his expensive suit. "There are relationships. Hazel, legacy relationships. From before you worked here, from before I was director." "What does that mean?" "It means that sometimes requests come from outside, from the city, from state offices." He lowered his voice, almost to a whisper. "They have friends everywhere. Hazel, the vendors, the contractors. They have friends in the licensing board. They have friends in the tax assessor's office. And yes, they have friends here." He looked at me with pleading eyes. "If I were you, I would stay in my lane. I would focus on the hospital audits. I would forget you saw those logs. You let them in," I said, the realization cold and hard. "You gave them the access. I didn't have a choice," he hissed, a flash of fear breaking through his corporate calm. "Do you know what happens if the city inspectors decide our building isn't up to code? Do you know what happens if the state delays our certification? We close. Hazel, everyone out there loses their job." He pointed a shaking finger at the door. "Please, just go back to your desk. Do your work. Pretend this didn't happen." I looked at him. I saw a man who had made his peace with being a pawn. "I can't do that." I said. I turned and walked out. I could feel his eyes boring into my back, terrified that I was going to bring the roof down on all of us. The drive to my father's house felt like driving backward in time. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long, orange shadows across the road. I pulled into the driveway. His truck was there, covered in a layer of dust from the site. I got out. I didn't have a script this time. I didn't rehearse my lines. The fear that usually gripped me when I approached this house had transmuted into something else. It was still fear, but it was cold. It was calculating. I opened the front door. The house was silent. The TV wasn't on. That was the first warning sign. Hank Coleman never sat in silence. He needed the noise of cable news or sports to drown out the quiet of the empty rooms. "Dad?" I called out. "Hazel?" His voice came from the kitchen. It sounded rough, brittle. I walked in. He was sitting at the kitchen table. The table was bare except for a mug of coffee and his phone. He wasn't drinking the coffee. He was staring at the wall. He looked up when I entered. He looked 10 years older than he had at dinner. The bluster was gone. The arrogance that usually radiated off him like heat was missing. He looked deflated. "You came," he said. "You told me to come. You said we needed to talk about papers." He nodded. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit down." I sat. I kept my purse on my lap, clutching it like a shield. He took a breath, a ragged sound that rattled in his chest. "Your mother," he said. "She kept things. She was a pack rat. You know that. She was organized." I corrected. "She kept things she didn't understand." He insisted, his eyes darting to the window as if he expected someone to be watching from the yard. "Receipts, old contracts, things that could be misinterpreted." Misinterpreted how? "Context. Hazel. Without context, business looks messy. It looks like things it isn't." He leaned forward. His hands were trembling. I had never seen my father's hands tremble. These were hands that could crush a beer can or swing a sledgehammer. Now they shook like leaves. "I need you to bring me her boxes," he said. "Whatever you have in that storage unit, bring it all here. I need to sort through it. Make sure there isn't anything confusing." I looked at him. I thought about the empty shelf in the storage unit, the box that was already gone. Someone already went to the unit. Dad, someone took the box from 1999. His head snapped up. His eyes went wide. "What?" "The box is gone." He paled. A look of genuine, unfiltered terror crossed his face. "They have it," he whispered. "Who?" He didn't answer. He rubbed his face with his hands, pressing the heels of his palms into his eyes. "Merrick," he muttered. It was barely a sound. I froze. "Who is Merrick?" He stopped rubbing his face. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the father I knew, the one who protected his territory, but it was brittle. "Forget I said that name," he snapped. "Forget you heard it. Dad, who is Merrick? Is he the one who—" "Stop it!" He slammed his hand on the table. The mug jumped. "Stop asking questions. Hazel, you don't know what you are dealing with. These aren't people you can report to HR. These aren't people who care about your little compliance rules." He stood up, pacing the small kitchen. "You stop meeting with that politician," he commanded. "You stop talking to Senator Whitfield. Do you hear me?" I stood up too. "How do you know I met with Whitfield?" I asked quietly. He stopped pacing. He looked at me, and I saw the trap snap shut. He knew because he was being watched. Or because he was watching me. "I have friends," he said vaguely. "People talk. You forged my signature." I said, "It wasn't a question." He flinched. He didn't deny it. He didn't explode. He just looked at me with a profound, exhausted sadness. "I did what I had to do," he said, "to keep the company, to keep the house, to keep you in that fancy college. Don't put this on me," I said, my voice trembling. "You called me worthless. Dad, at dinner, in front of everyone." He looked away. "I was trying to get you to leave," he whispered. "What?" "I was trying to make you go away, to make you hate me enough to stay away from all of this." I stared at him. The logic was twisted, broken, but in his warped world, it made a terrible kind of sense. He thought if he pushed me away, I wouldn't get dragged down with him. But it was too late. I am not walking away. I said, "Get out." "Hazel," he said, turning his back to me. "Just get out, before they see you here." I left him standing in the kitchen, a man surrounded by ghosts he had invited in. I drove back to my apartment. The sun had set, and the city was a grid of lights. I felt exposed. The windshield with the sticky note ghost felt like a gaping hole. I locked my apartment door. I engaged the deadbolt. I put the chain across. I went to the bookshelf in the living room. I pulled down the binder. It was a thick, plastic-covered binder with a pattern of roosters on it. My mother's recipe book. It was the one object Hank had never touched. He didn't cook. He didn't care about casseroles or pies. I sat on the floor, the binder heavy in my lap. I opened it. The smell of vanilla and old paper wafted up. It smelled like safety. It smelled like Saturday mornings before everything went wrong. I flipped through the pages. Lasagna, chicken pot pie, lemon tart. The pages were splattered with grease and flour. The markings of a life lived in service of feeding people. I turned to the back, past the section labeled desserts. There was a pocket inside the back cover. Usually, it held loose clippings from magazines. I reached in. My fingers brushed against something hard. I pulled it out. It was a small, white envelope, sealed. On the front, in my mother's looping cursive, was my name, Hazel. I stared at it. My heart beat in my throat. I tore it open. Inside was a silver key. It looked like a safe deposit box key. It was stamped with a number, 405. And there was a note, a single sheet of lined notepad paper. I unfolded it. The handwriting was rushed, jagged, unlike the careful script in the recipes. My darling Hazel, if you are reading this, then Hank has lost control. I prayed this day would never come. But I know him, and I know the men he shakes hands with. I have hidden the truth where he will never look. Not because I want to hurt him, but because I need to save you. Do not trust the smiles. Do not trust the money. And do not listen to your father when he gets loud. He gets loud when he is afraid. If he calls you worthless, it's because you're valuable. You are the only thing he couldn't sell. Use the key. Find the truth. And then, my brave girl, write your own ending. Love, Mom. I read the line again. If he calls you worthless, it's because you're valuable. The tears finally came. They were hot and fast, blurring the ink on the page. All those years, all those insults. I had thought they were about my failures. I thought he hated me because I wasn't enough. But he didn't hate me because I was weak. He feared me because I was strong. He feared me because I was the one person he couldn't corrupt, the one person he couldn't drag into the mud with him. I wiped my eyes. I held the silver key in my hand. It felt cold, solid. I wasn't worthless. I was the insurance policy. I stood up. I went to the window and looked out at the street below. A black sedan was parked across the street, engine idling. Let them watch. I had the key. The key felt heavy in my pocket, a cold weight against my thigh as I walked into the Bayview Community Credit Union. It was a small branch, the kind with stale coffee in the lobby and a carpet that had seen better decades. It was also, I noted with a surge of gratitude for my mother's foresight. 3 towns over from where my father did his banking, I approached the teller, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Gloria. Can I help you? Honey, she asked. I pulled the silver key from my pocket. I need to access a safe deposit box. I said, Box 405. Gloria took the key, her eyes flicking to the number stamped on the metal. Let me just check the signature card, she said. She typed into her terminal. I stood there, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I kept expecting an alarm to go off. I kept expecting her to say, I'm sorry. You need Henry Coleman's permission for this. She looked up, smiling. Hazel Coleman? Yes, you are the authorized signer, she said. Your mother set this up a long time ago, 1999. Looks like. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Is there anyone else on the account? I asked, needing to be sure. Gloria shook her head. Just you and the late Mrs. Coleman. It is explicitly marked no joint access. She came around the counter and led me to the vault. It was a heavy steel door that looked like it belonged in a movie, but inside, the room was small and smelled of dust and metallic air conditioning. She used her master key, and I used mine. The lock turned with a smooth, heavy click. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a small private room with a table and a single chair. "I will leave you to it," she said, closing the door. I sat alone with the box. It was gray metal, cool to the touch. It looked like a coffin for secrets. I opened the lid. At first, it looked like a time capsule of a normal life. There was a stack of photographs held together with a rubber band. I flipped through them. Me at 7 years old, missing a front tooth. My mother laughing at a picnic, her head thrown back in genuine joy, a look I rarely saw in her later years. My high school graduation tassel, blue and gold. My throat tightened. It was exactly what a mother would keep. But underneath the nostalgia was the business. There was a thick black ledger book, the kind you buy at a stationery store for $5. I opened it. It was not a recipe book. My mother had been a bookkeeper before she married Hank. She understood numbers. She understood that numbers told stories that people tried to hide. The pages were filled with her neat, cramped handwriting. Columns of dates, columns of amounts. I ran my finger down the first page. January 4th, 2001, check number 452, $10,000. Payee, Merrick Consulting. Note, no invoice provided. February 12th, 2001, check number 468, $15,000. Payee, Bayside Strategy Group. Note, consulting fees for Harbor Project. I flipped forward. The years went by, and the numbers got bigger. 20,000, 50,000, and the names of the payees changed. But the pattern remained: generic names, strategy groups, consulting partners, logistics solutions. She had tracked every single payment my father had made to companies that likely didn't exist. Tucked into the back of the ledger was a small, silver flash drive. It was taped to the cardboard cover with a piece of Scotch tape that had yellowed with age. On the tape, she had written 2 words: Harbor Project. I peeled the tape back carefully. I held the drive in my palm. I didn't have my laptop with me. I couldn't view it here. I put the ledger and the drive into my oversized purse. I left the photos and the tassel. I needed to leave something behind, just in case. I walked out of the bank. The sunlight hitting me like a physical blow. I felt exposed. I felt like I was carrying a grenade. I drove to a public library 2 towns away. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to use my work computer. I needed neutral ground. I found a quiet corner in the back, away from the windows. I pulled out my personal laptop, which I had started carrying with me everywhere. I plugged in the drive. There were hundreds of files, scanned PDFs of contracts, emails printed and scanned, but at the top of the list was a video file. File name: 4hazel.mp4. The timestamp was 6 years ago, just months before she died. I put in my earbuds. I clicked play. The screen filled with my mother's face. She was sitting in her car. The background was the blurry siding of our house. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back, and she was wearing her gardening sweater. "Hazel," she said. Her voice was so clear, so familiar, that tears pricked my eyes instantly. "If you are watching this," she continued, looking directly into the lens, "then I am gone, and Hank has done something that made you look." She took a deep breath. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your father is not a bad man, but he is a weak one. Years ago, when the business was failing, he took money from people he should not have known. He thought it was a loan. It wasn't a loan. It was a leash." She glanced out the car window, checking the driveway. "They use his company to move money. It is legal-looking theft. They overbill the city for projects, the harbor tunnel, the bridge repair, and Hank pays their shell companies for consulting. That is how they get the tax money out. Hank keeps a cut to keep the lights on, and they take the rest." She leaned closer to the camera. "I have tracked it all. The ledger is the proof, but Hazel, you cannot confront him. If you confront him, he will panic, and if he panics, he will tell Graham Merrick, and Merrick removes problems. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. I stayed because I thought I could manage it. I thought if I kept the books, I could keep the amount small enough that no one would notice. But it is getting bigger. She wiped her cheek. I love you, Hazel. You are so smart. You are so righteous. That is why I worry. You want the world to be fair. It isn't fair. It is just managed. Be careful. The screen went black. I sat in the library, the silence of the room pressing in on me. My grief, which had been a dull, aching void for 4 years, suddenly sharpened into a blade. I had always thought my mother was anxious. I thought she was a worrier, a woman who flinched at loud noises and deferred to my father because she was passive. I was wrong. She hadn't been passive. She had been a shield. She had lived in the belly of the beast for decades, documenting its anatomy, just to make sure that if the day ever came, I would have a weapon. She didn't stay with Hank because she was weak. She stayed to curate the evidence that would one day save me. I closed the laptop. My hands were steady now. The fear was still there, but it was different. It wasn't the trembling fear of a child waiting for her father to yell. It was the cold, focused fear of an analyst who finally had the full data set. I wasn't worthless. I was the legacy. I didn't go to Whitfield immediately. I went to a copy shop first. I made 3 copies of the ledger. I bought 3 new flash drives and copied the files. I mailed 1 set to a P.O. box I rented under a fake name. I hid 1 set in the spare tire well of my car. I kept the 3rd set in my bag. Then, and only then, did I go to the chaotic office above the bakery. Senator Whitfield was waiting. When I walked in, she smiled, but her eyes went immediately to my bag. "You found something," she said. I sat down. I pulled out the copy of the ledger, not the original, and placed it on the desk. My mother kept records. I said, Whitfield opened the book. She scanned the pages. Her expression shifted. The warmth vanished. The mask of the friendly mentor dissolved, revealing the operator underneath. "This is it," she murmured. "This is the roadmap." She looked up at me. Her eyes were hard, calculating. "This connects the shell companies directly to the municipal payouts. We can trace the EIN numbers from here. We can link Merrick to the strategy groups." She closed the book and placed her hand on it. "You did good work, Hazel." I didn't smile. "My mother did the work." I said, "I just delivered it." Whitfield nodded, already moving on to the next step in her mind. "Okay, here is how this plays out. We need to authenticate this. We will need your testimony to establish the chain of custody. You will have to testify that you found this in your mother's possession. And then what?" I asked. "Then we go to the grand jury. We get indictments. What about my father?" Whitfield paused. She picked up a pen and tapped it against the desk. "Your father is a co-conspirator. Hazel, there is no way around that. But if he cooperates, if he testifies against Merrick, we can discuss immunity, or at least a reduced sentence." "Discuss?" I repeated. "I cannot make promises until I see what he knows, but the timing is critical. We need to move before Merrick knows we have this." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to that confidential register again. "You are going to be the face of this. Hazel, the brave daughter standing up for the truth. It is a powerful story. It plays well." I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't talking about justice. She was talking about optics. She was talking about how my tragedy would look on the evening news. The brave daughter, it was a slogan. I realized then that I wasn't a partner in this investigation. I was an asset. I was a clean, sympathetic figure she could use to take down a corrupt machine. And if I got chewed up in the gears, well, that would just make the story more tragic and compelling. "I understand," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I stood up. "I will get you the digital files." I said, "But I'm keeping the originals." Whitfield's eyes narrowed slightly. "That is risky. Hazel, evidence can get lost, damaged. I am a compliance analyst. Senator, I know how to store records. I walked out before she could argue. The next day, a man approached me at the coffee shop near my office. He was handsome in a way that felt manufactured. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, a suit that cost more than my car. He slid into the empty chair opposite me without asking. "Hazel Coleman?" he said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I stiffened. "Who are you?" "Owen Red," he said. "I work with the senator. She asked me to touch base, to support you." He put a coffee cup on the table. "She is worried about you." "Hazel, this is a lot of pressure." I took a sip of my own coffee, watching him over the rim. "I am fine. Good. Good." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Clara, the senator, she mentioned you held on to the originals. The ledger, the drive." He paused, waiting for me to confirm. I said nothing. "That makes us nervous." "Hazel, if Merrick finds out you have them, well, it puts a target on your back. We have a secure facility, a vault. It would be safer there." His concern sounded almost genuine, but there was an edge to it, a hunger. "Where are they?" "Hazel? At your apartment?" I stared at him. "Why does it matter?" I asked. "As long as you have the copies." "Chain of custody," he said quickly. Too quickly. "We need to be able to produce the originals if the defense challenges the copies. It is just procedure." He smiled again, but this time it looked like a grimace. "Just tell me where they are, and I can have a courier pick them up. You won't even have to carry them." My internal alarm bells were ringing so loud I could barely hear the shop's music. He wasn't here to support me. He was here to secure the asset. Or maybe he wasn't working for Whitfield at all. Maybe he was working for someone else. And Whitfield was just a convenient cover. "They are safe." "Owen," I said, "tell the senator I will produce them when the subpoena comes. Not before." I stood up and walked away. I felt his eyes on me, drilling into my back. I needed to see my brother. I met Luke at a diner on the edge of town, a place where we used to get milkshakes after his Little League games. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his fingernails rimmed with grease and dirt. He was wearing his work vest, but he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He ordered a black coffee and stared into it. "You need to stop." "Hazel," he said quietly. I looked at him. "Stop what?" "Stop digging. Stop meeting with these people." He looked up, and I saw real fear in his face. Dad is losing it. Hayes, he is up all night. He is shredding papers in the home office. I walked in on him yesterday, and he was feeding contracts into the machine like he was trying to erase the last 10 years. I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Luke, he is in trouble. Real trouble." "I know," Luke hissed, pulling his hand away. "I know he's in trouble, but you are making it worse. He is a criminal. Luke, he stole from the city. He is not a monster." Luke's voice rose, and a few people in the diner turned to look. He lowered his voice again. "He is cornered. He made a mistake years ago, and now he is trapped. He is trying to keep the guys employed. He is trying to keep the company alive. He is using you." I said, "He is using his own children to cover his tracks. He is our father." "Hazel, that means something." "Does it?" I asked. It didn't mean anything when he called me worthless. It didn't mean anything when he forged my signature. Luke flinched. "He told me about that," he said softly. "He said he was sorry. He said he was desperate." I looked at my brother. I loved him. He was kind and loyal and hardworking, but he was also an enabler. He had learned to survive Hank by becoming a sponge, absorbing the anger and the chaos so it wouldn't spill over. I found Mom's ledger. "Luke." He went still. "What ledger?" "She tracked it all. Every payoff, every fake consultant. I have the proof." Luke closed his eyes. He looked like he was in physical pain. "Burn it," he whispered. "What?" "Burn it. Hazel, please. If that gets out, it destroys everything. The company, the house. Dad goes to prison. I lose my job. The guys lose their jobs." "Is that what you want? To protect a lie?" "I want to survive," he snapped. "I want to have a family left when this is over. You? You are so obsessed with being right that you don't care who you burn down." He stood up, throwing a $5 bill on the table. "If you release that ledger, you are not just hurting Dad, you are hurting me." He walked out. I watched him go, feeling a crack form in my heart. I was losing him. The truth was a wedge, and I was driving it right down the center of my family. I didn't burn the ledger. Instead, I answered a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hazel Coleman?" "Yes, this is Tessa Vale. I am a reporter with the City Chronicle." I had read Tessa Vale. She was the one who broke the story on the sanitation department scandal last year. She was tenacious. "I have nothing to say to the press," I said, repeating the line I had rehearsed. "I don't want to quote. Hazel, I want to show you something." We met in a park, sitting on a bench watching pigeons fight over a crust of bread. Tessa was small, sharp-featured, dressed in a trench coat that looked like it had been slept in. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "This was leaked to me yesterday," she said, "from inside the Department of Public Works." I took the paper. It was an invoice. Vendor: Coleman Contracting. Project: Harbor Tunnel. Ventilation retrofit. Amount: $450,000. Status: paid. I looked at the date. Last month. "So?" I asked. "My father's company works on the tunnel." Tessa looked at me. "I went to the tunnel yesterday. Hazel, I walked the entire length of the service corridor." She paused. "There is no ventilation retrofit. The old fans are still there. Rusted solid. No one has touched them in a decade." I stared at the invoice. "The city paid your father $500,000 for work that was never done." Tessa said. And 2 days later, a check for $400,000 moved from Coleman Contracting to a firm called Merrick Strategies. She leaned in. "I know you are talking to Whitfield. I know her committee is sniffing around. But Whitfield is a politician. She will cut a deal if it serves her." She looked at me with intensity. "I don't cut deals. I print the truth." She tapped the invoice. "Your father isn't the mastermind. Hazel, he is the bagman. And if you let Whitfield control this story, she will make him the villain to protect the real players." I looked at the invoice. $450,000. Phantom work, phantom money. Hank was keeping $50,000, a 10% fee for laundering the money. He wasn't a businessman. He was a filter. I looked at Tessa. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you are the only one who actually wants the truth," she said, "and because I think you are in danger." She handed me a card. "If you decide you want to tell the real story, not the senator's version, call me." I took the card. I sat on the bench for a long time after she left. I had the ledger. I had the drive. I had the invoice. I had the senator, the fixer, the brother, and the reporter, all of them pulling at me, all of them wanting me to play a role in their version of the play. But as I sat there, fingering the silver key in my pocket, I remembered my mother's voice. "Write your own ending. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to be a soundbite. And I wasn't going to be a martyr." I stood up. It was time to stop reacting. It was time to start auditing. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in my apartment. It was 3 a.m, a time that had become my new normal. A solitary shift where I ceased to be Hazel Coleman, the daughter, and became Hazel Coleman, the analyst. I had spent the last 6 hours inside the digital architecture of the flash drive my mother had hidden. It was a labyrinth of scanned invoices, spreadsheets, and emails. But once I filtered the noise, the pattern emerged with terrifying clarity. It was not a single heist. It was a slow, systematic bleed. The mechanism was the change order. In construction, a change order is standard. You hit bedrock you did not expect, or the price of steel goes up, and you file a request for more money. It is boring, bureaucratic, and invisible to the public, but my father's company, Coleman Contracting, filed change orders at a rate that defied statistical probability. Project: West Side Drainage Repair. Original bid: $600,000. Change order 1. Soil instability. $50,000. Change order 2. Material delay. $30,000. Change order. 3. Subcontractor specialized consultation. $75,000. The final cost was nearly double the bid, and every time, the specialized consultation fees flowed to the same entity, Merrick Strategies. I ran a search for Merrick Strategies in the State Business Registry. It was a ghost. It had a registered agent in a strip mall 3 counties over. It had no website, no phone number, no employees listed on LinkedIn. It appeared on a project, absorbed a 6-figure sum, and then dissolved, only to be replaced by Merrick Consulting or Merrick Logistics on the next job. It was a shell game played with taxpayer money. I dug deeper into the name Graham Merrick. My mother had mentioned him in her video, but to the internet, he was a phantom. There were no interviews, no scandals, but there were photos. I found him in the background of a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new library. He was a tall man with silver hair and a suit that fit too well, standing just behind the mayor, smiling like he knew a joke no one else heard. I found him in a gala photo for the Police Benevolent Association, his hand resting familiarly on the shoulder of a city councilman. I found him in a blurry Instagram photo, tagged by a congressional aide, raising a glass of champagne at a fundraiser in D.C. He was everywhere and nowhere. He was the man who connected the dots, the lubricant that made the machine run, and no one admitted to knowing him. When I searched for articles mentioning him, I found nothing. He was a lobbyist who never registered as a lobbyist, a consultant who never produced a report. I sat back, rubbing my eyes. The scale of it made me nauseous. My father was not just a crooked contractor. He was a host organism for a parasite that was feeding on the entire city. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating against the wood. It was a text from Senator Whitfield's office. "We need to move. The window is closing." I ignored it. 5 minutes later, a notification from an encrypted messaging app I had installed for Tessa Vale. "I have a lead on the fake invoices. We should run it Sunday. If we wait, they will shred everything." I ignored that too. Then, a text from Luke. "Dad is selling the truck, the big Ford. He says he needs cash for payroll. Hazel, please, the guys are scared." I put the phone face down. I felt like I was being quartered, pulled in 3 different directions by 3 different versions of the right thing. Whitfield wanted a prosecution. She wanted a timeline that suited her committee hearings. To her, this was a chess move to clean up the city and polish her resume. Tessa wanted a headline. She wanted the truth, yes, but she also wanted the scoop. She wanted to expose the rot before it could be painted over, regardless of who got splattered by the paint. And Luke just wanted to survive. He wanted to protect the 50 men who worked for Coleman Contracting, men who had families and mortgages, and who had no idea their paychecks were being subsidized by money laundering. And me? I just wanted to know why my father had looked me in the eye and called me worthless. The confrontation happened 2 nights later. I was coming home from the grocery store, carrying a bag of oranges and a rotisserie chicken, mundane fuel for a life that felt increasingly like a thriller movie. The streetlights were flickering, buzzing with an electric hum that set my teeth on edge. I saw him standing by the entrance to my apartment building. Hank Coleman did not look like the tyrant of Sunday dinner. He was leaning against the brick wall, wearing a windbreaker that seemed too thin for the coastal damp. He wasn't smoking. He had quit 10 years ago, but he held his hand near his mouth like he was remembering the habit. He saw me and straightened up. I stopped 10 feet away. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I just tightened my grip on the grocery bag. "Hazel," he said. His voice was not a bark. It was a rustle, dry and cracked. "I am not giving you the papers." "Dad," I said, my voice steady. He shook his head, a quick, jerky motion. "I don't want the papers. I know you found the safe deposit box. The bank called me. They said the account had been accessed." He took a step toward me. I took a step back. He stopped, holding his hands up in surrender. "Please," he said, "just listen to me." I waited. "You think I am a monster," he said. "You think I sat down one day and decided to steal from the city. I think you forged my signature." I said, cold as ice, I think you used my name to cover your crimes. I used your name because it was the only clean thing I had left, he burst out, the desperation cracking through his restraint. He slumped back against the wall. Do you remember 2008? He asked. I frowned. I had been in college. The recession. I said, the recession, he repeated with a bitter laugh. It killed us. Hazel. The private contracts dried up overnight. No one was building houses. No one was renovating kitchens. I had 40 guys on payroll. 40 families. I was going to have to fire everyone. I was going to lose the company. I was going to lose the house. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for understanding. Then Merrick showed up. He said he could get us on the preferred vendor list for the city. He said he could guarantee municipal contracts, steady work, government money. All I had to do was hire his consulting firm for safety reviews. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I thought it was a fee, a kickback. I knew it was dirty, but I thought it was a one-time thing, to save the business, to save the guys. So you signed? I said, I signed, he whispered. And once I signed the first one, they had me. The consulting fees got bigger, the work got smaller. I tried to stop it in 2010. I told Merrick I was out. He looked at me, and the fear in his eyes was absolute. He showed me the paperwork I had already signed. He told me that if I walked away, I would go to prison for fraud. He told me the company would be seized. He told me. He swallowed hard. He told me that accidents happen on construction sites. The wind blew a candy wrapper across the pavement, the scratching sound loud in the silence. So you became his hostage. I said, I became his bank. Hank corrected. I wash the money. I take the risk. He takes the profit. And the forgery? I asked. The memo with my name? He needed a compliance sign-off for the harbor job. Our usual guy had quit. Merrick knew you worked in compliance. He knew you were in the hospital. He said it was poetic, that the whole family should pitch in. He looked down at his boots. I didn't want to do it. Hazel, I swear to God, but he said if the money didn't move by Friday, he would burn the warehouse down. I stared at him. I saw the trap. I saw the years of fear, the slow erosion of his soul, but it didn't explain the dinner. If you are a victim, I said, my voice trembling with a sudden surge of old pain, then why did you treat me like garbage? Why call me worthless? Why humiliate me in front of everyone? He looked up. His face was ravaged by grief. Because you are smart. Hazel, you are so damn smart. He took a step closer, ignoring my flinch. If you thought you were worthless, you would stay away. You would stay in your safe, boring job. You wouldn't look at my books. You wouldn't ask questions. You wouldn't try to impress me by looking into the business. He reached out a hand but dropped it before he touched me. I had to make you small, he whispered, because if you were big, if you were capable, you would be a threat to them. And if you were a threat to them, they would hurt you. The revelation hit me like a physical weight, the cruelty, the insults, the constant dismissal of my career. It wasn't because he was disappointed. It was a quarantine. He had built a wall of contempt to keep me out of the blast zone. You broke my heart to save my life, I said. He nodded, tears spilling over onto his rough cheeks. And now you are in the middle of it, he choked out. Just like I knew you would be. Merrick knows. Hazel. He knows you are talking to Whitfield. He will ruin us. He will put me in jail. And he will destroy your career. And he will hurt Luke. Please, Hazel, stop. Just give them the papers. Let me handle it. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had been the villain of my life story for 30 years. He was small. He was terrified. And he was trying, in his broken, toxic way, to be a father. I shifted the grocery bag to my other hip. I can't stop. Dad, I said. Hazel, I can't. It is too late. Whitfield has the copies. He went pale. But I can control how it ends. I said. I looked him in the eye. I am not worthless. Dad, and because I am not worthless, I am the only one who can get you out of this. I walked past him to the door of my building. I punched in the code. Go home. Dad, I said without turning around. and don't shred anything else. The next morning, I walked into Senator Whitfield's office without an appointment. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I walked past her desk and pushed open the door to the inner sanctum. Whitfield was on the phone. She looked up, annoyed, then saw my face. She hung up without saying goodbye. "Hazel," she said, her voice cool. "We usually schedule these things." I sat down. I didn't ask permission. "We need to set ground rules," I said. Whitfield raised an eyebrow. She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Ground rules? I am a United States Senator. Hazel, you are a witness. I am the evidence." I corrected. "Without me, you have a pile of paper and a theory. With me, you have a narrative. You said it yourself. The brave daughter." Whitfield watched me. She didn't argue. "What do you want?" "I want the employees of Coleman Contracting protected," I said. "I want to guarantee that the seizure of assets won't freeze their payroll. These are innocent men. They didn't know." Whitfield frowned. "That is a Department of Justice matter. I cannot control—" "You can make calls," I interrupted. "You can structure the indictment to target the shell companies, not the operating payroll of the primary contractor." I took a breath. "And I want my father to self-surrender. No raid, no SWAT team kicking down the door at 5 a.m, no cameras on the lawn." Whitfield bristled. Her composure cracked, just for a second, revealing the steel underneath. "You don't get to dictate the optics of an arrest. Hazel, this is a major corruption case. The public needs to see justice being done. A raid sends a message. A raid is theater." I snapped. "You want the footage for your re-election campaign. You want to look tough on crime." I leaned forward. "If you turn this into a circus, I will go to the press, not your friendly reporters, but the ones who hate you, and I will tell them that you tried to use a family tragedy for political gain. I will tell them you sat on the evidence until the polling looked good." The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed. Whitfield's eyes were cold, calculating. She was measuring me. She was realizing that the compliant, traumatized woman she had met a week ago had been replaced by someone else. "You are playing a dangerous game," she said softly. "I am not playing. Senator, I am negotiating." She stared at me for a long minute. Then, she gave a curt nod. "I will see what I can do about the payroll, and if your father cooperates fully, we can arrange a surrender at the courthouse. Quietly." "Thank you," I said. I stood up to leave. "Oh, Hazel," Owen Red said from the doorway. I hadn't heard him come in. "The fixer." He was leaning against the doorframe, holding a file, wearing that same manufactured smile. "I just wanted to apologize for the other day." He said, "I came on too strong about the flash drive. I know you are under a lot of stress." I nodded. "It is fine. Owen, I know how hard it is." He continued, his voice dripping with sympathy. "Especially with your brother texting you about the payroll issues. It puts a lot of weight on your shoulders." I froze. My hand was on the doorknob. I turned slowly to look at him. "What did you say?" He blinked, realizing his mistake instantly. His smile faltered. I just meant, I assume your family is worried about the business side of things. You said my brother texted me about payroll." I said, my voice low, "I never told you that. I never told the senator that." I looked at Whitfield. She was studying a document on her desk, studiously ignoring the conversation. "You are monitoring my phone," I said. Owen laughed, a nervous, hacking sound. "Of course not. Hazel, that would be illegal. I must have inferred it. It is a logical concern. You quoted the text." I said, "You knew the specific issue was payroll." I looked from Owen to Whitfield. The white hat, the ally, they weren't just investigating the corruption, they were investigating me. They had cloned my phone, or they had a tap on the network. "Hazel," Whitfield said, finally looking up, "we have to be thorough. We have to make sure our witnesses are stable, secure. You are spying on me." I said, "We are protecting the integrity of the case," she countered, her voice hardening. "If you are leaking things to your brother, or to reporters, we need to know. I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. It wasn't just Merrick. It was everyone. The bad guys wanted to silence me. The good guys wanted to control me. I realized then that there were no teams. There were just people with power, and people without it. I opened the door. "If you read my texts," I said, "then you know I am not bluffing. Don't raid the house." I walked out. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs. Listening to the echo of my own footsteps, I went home. I felt dirty. I wanted to scrub my skin. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone. It felt like a tracking device now, a bug. I turned it off and threw it in the drawer. A knock at the door made me jump. I moved to the peephole. A man in a generic delivery uniform. "Miss Coleman?" he called out. "Delivery." I opened the door. Keeping the chain on, he slid a flat, red envelope through the crack. "Have a nice day," he said, and walked away without waiting for a signature. I closed the door. My hands shook as I picked up the envelope. It wasn't a delivery. It was legal service. I tore it open. Subpoena Duces Tecum, the people of the state versus John Doe et al., commanding Hazel Coleman to appear and produce documents. I scanned the legalese. It was a demand for the ledger, for the drives, for everything. Then I looked at the date of appearance. January 23rd, 2026. I frowned. Today was January 27th. The date on the subpoena was 4 days ago. I read it again. It was impossible. You couldn't subpoena someone for a date that had already passed. It would be thrown out of court instantly. It was a clerical error, or it was a message. I looked at the signature on the bottom. It wasn't signed by a judge. It was signed by a clerk of the court. But the signature was illegible. A scrawl of black ink. I sat down at the kitchen table. If this had been a real subpoena from Whitfield's office, it would be perfect. Andrea Vance didn't make mistakes. This was a fake, or a deliberate screw-up. Why send a subpoena with the wrong date? To make me panic. To make me think I was already in contempt of court. To make me think I had missed my chance to cooperate legally, so I would do something rash. Or maybe it was to tell me that the system was broken. That the dates didn't matter. That the law was just paper, and paper could be written to say anything. Forces on both sides were weaponizing procedure. Whitfield used grand juries. Merrick used terrifyingly casual notes on windshields. And now, someone was using the court system to gaslight me. I looked at the red envelope. They wanted me to feel unmoored. They wanted me to feel like the ground was shifting so fast I couldn't stand up. But I was a compliance analyst. I lived in a world of shifting regulations and contradictory codes. I knew how to stand on moving ground. I stood up. I went to the drawer and took out my phone. I turned it on. I knew they were listening. Good. I navigated to my contacts. I scrolled past Whitfield, past Owen, past Hank. I stopped on the name I had saved from the business card. Tessa Vale. I didn't call. If I called, Whitfield would hear it. Instead, I opened the calendar app. I created an event for tomorrow at noon. Location? The public library. 3rd floor. Biography section. I knew Owen Red would see the calendar update. He would think I was meeting someone. He would send a watcher, but I wasn't going to the library. I was going to send them on a wild goose chase. And while they were watching the biography section, I was going to go to the one place Graham Merrick wouldn't expect me. I was going to go to the job site. I needed to see the ghost work with my own eyes. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning, landing on the doorsteps of the city with a heavy, ominous thud. Tessa Vale had kept her word. She hadn't named names, but she had painted a portrait so detailed that the anonymity was a technicality, not a shield. The architecture of greed. How one prominent contracting family became the city's ATM. I sat at my kitchen table, my coffee going cold, reading the words on my tablet. Tessa wrote about the phantom intermediaries and the legacy of intimidation. She described a patriarch trapped in a vice of his own making and a next generation struggling to untangle the web. The city exploded. My inbox, usually reserved for automated compliance updates and spam, began to ping with a manic rhythm. My personal email address had been scraped from some public directory, and the messages poured in. You are a hero. 1 red. Finally, someone is standing up to the old boys club. Traitor. Read the next. You are ruining your father to save yourself. Disgusting. Watch your back. Read a third. I felt a strange dissociation, as if I were reading reviews for a character in a play I hadn't realized I was starring in. To half the city, I was Joan of Arc. To the other half, I was Brutus. Neither side knew that I was just a woman who had found a ledger in a recipe binder and was trying to keep her family from drowning. I put the tablet down. The silence in my apartment felt charged, static. Then my phone rang. It was Luke. I answered, expecting anger. I expected him to scream about the article, about how I had betrayed the code of silence. Hazel, he choked out. He sounded like he was 7 years old and had just scraped his knee on the driveway. Luke, what is it? She left. Hayes, Becca left. My stomach twisted. Becca was his fiancée. They had been together since high school. She was the one steady thing in Luke's chaotic orbit of job sites and Hank's demands. I am so sorry. Luke, she saw the article, he said, his voice thick with tears. Her dad saw it. He told her that if she married into the Coleman family, she was marrying into an indictment. She packed a bag this morning. She didn't even yell. She just cried and said she couldn't live like this. I gripped the phone. Luke, come over. Do not stay at the house. I can't, he said. I have to go to the yard. The guys are freaking out. They think the checks are going to bounce. Are they? I asked. Luke went silent. The pause stretched, heavy and guilty. Luke? I knew. Hazel, he whispered. The air left the room. What did you know? I knew about the invoice, the one for the ventilation. I closed my eyes. You knew Dad took $500,000 for work he didn't do? I didn't know the amount, he protested, desperation creeping in. I just knew we didn't send a crew to the tunnel. I saw the work order, and I saw Dad sign it off as complete. I asked him about it, and what did he say? He said it was a paperwork shuffle. He said the money was being reallocated from another budget line to cover the insurance premiums. He said if he didn't sign it, the insurance would lapse, and we wouldn't be able to bid on the school renovation. Luke took a ragged breath. I let it go. Hazel, I let it go because he looked so tired. I didn't want him to collapse. I thought I was helping. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but it was immediately doused by a wave of exhausting familiarity. This was the Coleman curse. We didn't protect each other from the world. We protected Hank from reality. Luke had stayed quiet for the same reason I had stayed away for years, because confronting Hank meant breaking him. And none of us wanted to be the one holding the hammer. You were not helping. Luke, I said gently, you were just buying him time to dig the hole deeper. I know that now, he cried. But what do I do? Becca is gone. The guys are looking at me like I'm the devil. And Dad is sitting in his office staring at the shredder like it is a crystal ball. Keep your head down, I said. Do not sign anything. Do not talk to anyone but me. I hung up. I felt betrayed. Yes, my own brother had been a passive accomplice, but I couldn't hate him. He was a victim of the same emotional extortion that had kept me paralyzed for decades. By Wednesday, the financial oxygen was gone. It happened with the speed of a guillotine. It wasn't the law that came for Hank first. It was the market. I went to the office. Veracity Health was still my employer, though my boss, Mr. Sterling, now looked at me with the terrified reverence one might reserve for a ticking bomb, and I watched the collapse from a distance. Luke texted me updates. Lumberyard canceled our credit account. Cash on delivery only. Concrete supplier won't return calls. Bank just called. They are reviewing the line of credit due to reputational risk clauses. They froze the operating account. It was a masterclass in soft power. Graham Merrick didn't need to send thugs to break kneecaps. He just had to make a few phone calls to the right risk officers at the right banks. He was suffocating the business. He was starving the beast to see if it would bite its own master. My father was being dismantled, transaction by transaction. That afternoon, my phone rang. A blocked number. Hazel, "It is Andrea. The senator wants to see you." I went. Senator Whitfield was in a different mood today. The frantic energy of the investigation had settled into a confident, predatory calm. She had read the article. She had seen the city's reaction. She knew the water was churning, and she was ready to cast her net. She gestured for me to sit. "The article has accelerated things," she said. I looked at her. "Did you leak it?" I asked. Whitfield smiled, a tight, inscrutable expression. "I don't leak. Hazel, I strategize. But Tessa Vale is a resourceful woman, and frankly, the pressure helps us. How does destroying my father's business before he is even indicted help us?" I asked. "He can't pay his employees. 50 families are going to miss their rent checks on Friday." "That is unfortunate," Whitfield said, waving a hand as if dismissing a waiter. "But it puts pressure on the weak links. It forces errors." She leaned forward, her elbows on the desk. "I have a proposition for you." I waited. "We are going to move to the indictment phase next week. Once that happens, your name will be public record. You will be the star witness. I know that. I want to offer you formal status as a protected cooperator." She said, "It comes with certain securities, federal marshals if needed, relocation assistance during the trial." "And after?" I asked. "After," she said, her eyes gleaming. "I am forming a state-level task force on municipal ethics reform. I want you to chair the Civilian Oversight Board." I stared at her. "You want to give me a job?" "I want to give you a platform," she corrected. "You are perfect for it. The whistleblower daughter, the professional compliance analyst who cleaned up her own house. It is a redemption story. Hazel, voters love redemption stories." I heard the words she wasn't saying. "I own you. If I took the job, if I took the protection." I was tying my future to her political rise. I would be her trophy. "Look at what I saved," she would say at every campaign stop, pointing to me. My safety would be contingent on my ability to stay on script. "And what if the investigation leads somewhere you don't want it to go?" I asked. "What if it leads to donors you like? Or state officials you need?" Whitfield's smile didn't waver. "But the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The task force will have a very specific mandate," she said. "We focus on the contracting fraud. We stay focused. That is how we win." I stood up. "I will think about it." I said, "Think fast. Hazel, the offer expires when the indictment drops. I needed air. I needed to be somewhere that didn't smell of toner and ambition. There was a fundraiser happening at the convention center downtown, a gala for the Coastal Preservation Society. I wasn't invited, but the lobby was public, a cavernous space of glass and marble where people in tuxedos mingled with tourists. I went there sometimes, just to sit and watch the ocean through the 3-story windows. I was standing by a pillar, watching the waves crash against the seawall. When a voice spoke beside me, "The view is expensive, isn't it?" I turned. Graham Merrick stood there. He looked exactly like his photos, only more substantial. He was taller than I expected, wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He had a glass of sparkling water in his hand. He wasn't surrounded by handlers. He was alone, exposed, and entirely comfortable. My heart hammered against my ribs. A sudden, violent rhythm. "Mr. Merrick," I said. He smiled. It was a warm, grandfatherly smile. The kind of smile that made you want to trust him with your investments. "Please, call me Graham. I have heard so much about you." "Hazel." I looked around. The lobby was crowded, but we were in a quiet eddy near the windows. "I bet you have," I said, keeping my voice steady. He took a sip of his water. "I wanted to congratulate you," he said. "Congratulate me?" "On your tenacity. It is rare. Most people are content to let the machinery hum. They don't look under the hood. But you are the type of daughter who asks hard questions." He turned to look at me fully. His eyes were a pale, watery blue. They looked dead. "I admire that," he said. "Your father is a good man. Hazel, a hard worker. But he never had your precision. He stole from the city," I said, "and you helped him. Merrick chuckled softly. Stealing is such a crude word. We facilitated liquidity. We kept the city moving. Infrastructure is expensive. Hazel, sometimes you have to be creative to get the concrete poured. He stepped closer. He didn't loom. He just invaded my personal space by an inch, enough to register as dominance. I understand you're looking into real estate, he said. I frowned. I am not. Oh? I thought I saw a query on your credit report. You have a mortgage with First National, don't you? My blood ran cold. On the apartment on Elm Street, he continued pleasantly. Unit 4B. Nice building. And you have a wonderful rate. 3.5%. You locked that in years ago. Smart. He swirled the water in his glass. It would be a shame if the bank found an irregularity in your application. Banks are so skittish these days. They can call a loan for the smallest infraction. Just like they called your father's line of credit. He wasn't threatening to break my legs. He was threatening to make me homeless. He was telling me that he had been inside my financial life, that he knew my address, my unit number, my interest rate. He was telling me that there were no walls thick enough to keep him out. You are threatening me. I said. He looked shocked. Threatening? Heavens, no. I am making conversation. I am just saying that stability is fragile. Hazel. It relies on everyone agreeing to the same set of facts. When people start rewriting the narrative, things get unstable. He checked his watch. A gold Patek Philippe that cost more than my car. I should go in. The speeches are starting. He looked at me one last time. Give my best to Hank. Tell him I hope he finds a way to resolve his cash flow problems. It is a tough economy. He walked away, merging into the crowd of black ties and sequins. I stood by the window, shivering. The threat was wrapped in silk. But it was lethal. He hadn't just threatened me. He had demonstrated access. He was telling me that my life, my apartment, my credit, my safety, was something he could turn off like a light switch. I drove home, constantly checking the rearview mirror. Every pair of headlights looked like a tail. Every shadow looked like a man in a suit. I parked my car and ran to the building entrance. I took the stairs 2 at a time. I reached my floor. The hallway was empty. I walked to my door. It was ajar. Just an inch. The lock mechanism was disengaged. I froze. I listened. Silence from inside. I pushed the door open with my foot. My keys clutched in my hand like a pathetic weapon. The apartment was dark. Hello? I called out. Silence. I flipped the light switch. The living room was untouched. My laptop was on the coffee table where I had left it. The TV was mounted on the wall. My purse was on the hook. A burglar would have taken the electronics. I walked into the bedroom. The dresser drawers were closed. The jewelry box on the vanity was undisturbed. I opened the top drawer of my nightstand. This was where I kept the mundane debris of life. Chapstick, a spare charger, a notepad, and tucked in the back, the silver key to the safe deposit box. I had emptied the box days ago. I had the ledger. I had the drive. The key was useless now. It opened nothing but an empty metal drawer at a credit union. I reached into the back of the nightstand drawer. Empty. I pulled the drawer all the way out. I dumped the contents on the bed. Chapstick, charger, notepad, pen, no key. I sat on the edge of the bed. They hadn't come to steal the evidence. They knew I wouldn't keep the evidence in my nightstand. They had come to take the key to show me that they could. It was a response to the ledger. You have a key? We can take it. You think you are safe in your home? We have a key to that, too. It was a reminder that I wasn't in control. I looked at the open bedroom door. I felt a violation so deep it made me nauseous. A stranger had been here. Had they touched my pillow? Had they looked at the photos on my mirror? I stood up. Fear, cold and paralyzing, tried to grip me. I wanted to curl up in the corner. I wanted to call Luke and tell him he was right, that we should burn it all and run. But then I remembered Merrick's face in the lobby. 3.5%. He thought I was a number. He thought I was a variable in an equation he could balance. He was wrong. I went to the kitchen. I grabbed a roll of packing tape. I went to the living room and taped the copy of the ledger, the one I had kept in the apartment. underneath the sofa. It was a temporary measure. Then I picked up my phone. I called Senator Whitfield. She answered on the first ring. Hazel? I am in. I said, Good. I knew you would make the right choice. I am not finished. I said, my voice hard. I will testify. I will be your witness. I will stand in front of the grand jury, and I will point the finger at my father and at Merrick. Excellent. We can start the paperwork. But, I interrupted. I have conditions. You already made demands about the payroll. Hazel, this isn't about payroll. This is about the truth. I took a deep breath. I will turn over the original ledger and the drive, but I am not giving them to you. Whitfield paused. Excuse me? I am giving the originals to a court-appointed special master, an independent third party. They will be cataloged and preserved in a federal evidence locker. Not your committee safe, Hazel. That is highly irregular. And, I continued, riding over her objection, I am giving certified copies to 2 separate attorneys in 2 different counties, and I am giving a sealed packet to Tessa Vale at the City Chronicle. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. If I disappear, I said, or if I have an accident, or if my credit is ruined and I end up on the street. Tessa opens the packet, and she publishes everything, including the fact that your office knew about the corruption months ago and waited for the polling to improve. I was bluffing about the last part. I didn't know how long she had known, but it landed. You are threatening a United States Senator, Whitfield said quietly. No, I said. I am ensuring that the narrative stays accurate. Do we have a deal? Another pause. Then, a sigh. You are a difficult woman. Hazel, I learned from the best. Do we have a deal? Yes. Bring the originals to the federal courthouse tomorrow at 9. The special master will be there. I hung up. My hands were shaking. But not from fear. From adrenaline. I had just checkmated the 2 most powerful people in my life. Midnight. I was sitting on the floor, packing a bag. I couldn't stay here tonight. Not with the door lock compromised. I was going to a hotel. A knock. I jumped. I looked at the peephole. Hank. I opened the door. He looked like a ghost. His clothes were rumpled. He hadn't shaved in days. He smelled of scotch and sawdust. He didn't come in. He just stood in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe as if it were the only thing holding him upright. They took the truck. He said, What? The repo men. They came an hour ago. Took the big Ford, the one Luke drives. He laughed, a dry rattling sound. Luke cried. Can you believe that? A grown man crying over a truck? Come inside. Dad? I said. He shook his head. I can't. If I come in, I might taint you. I am toxic. Hazel, everyone who touches me gets burned. He looked at me. His eyes were red, but clear. I heard you are testifying. Who told you? Whitfield's office called my lawyer. They offered a deal. If I plead guilty to fraud and conspiracy, and if I corroborate your testimony, 5 years, maybe 3 with good behavior. He looked down at his hands. 5 years in a cell. I will be almost 70 when I get out. It is better than 20, I said softly. He nodded. Yeah, I guess. He looked up at me again. I am sorry about the key, he said. I froze. You took the key? He shook his head. No, Merrick's guy. He told me he did it. He said he wanted to send you a postcard. Hank's face crumpled. I tried to stop them. Hazel, I tried to keep you out of it. I know. I said, at dinner, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. When I called you, that name, worthless. Yeah. He swallowed hard. I didn't mean it. You know I didn't mean it, right? I looked at him. Why did you say it? Dad? Really? He looked past me, into the dark apartment, because you were standing there, looking so clean, so perfect. You had your badge and your suit and your rules, and I was covered in mud. I was drowning in it. He met my eyes. I wanted you to feel small. He whispered, because if you think you are small, maybe they won't notice you. Maybe you can hide in the cracks. Big people, important people, they get targeted. Worthless people get ignored. He reached out and touched my cheek. His hand was rough, calloused, warm. I wanted you to be ignored. I wanted you to be safe. I leaned into his hand for a second, feeling the tragedy of his logic. He had tried to break my spirit to save my body. It was a twisted, desperate love. But it was love. You failed. Dad, I said gently. He pulled his hand back and smiled. A sad, crooked smile. I know. You were never small. Hazel, even when you were 7, you took up the whole room. He stepped back. I'm going to turn myself in tomorrow, he said. Before they come for me, I don't want Luke to see the handcuffs. I will be there. I said, no, he said firmly. You stay away. You write your story. Let me finish mine. He turned and walked down the hallway. A heavy, defeated man walking toward the end of his life as he knew it. I watched him go until he turned the corner. Then I went back inside. I finished packing my bag. I put the copy of the ledger in the side pocket. I wasn't small, I wasn't worthless, and I wasn't going to be ignored. The hearing was in 3 days. I was ready. The conference room in the state capitol smelled of stale coffee and aggressive cologne. For 3 days. I had been sat in a leather chair that squeaked every time I shifted my weight, surrounded by a phalanx of political strategists who looked at me not as a person, but as a biological hard drive containing data they needed to extract and refine. You are drifting. Hazel, said the lead consultant, a man named Marcus who wore a watch that cost more than my father's truck. Keep it clean. Keep it focused. The committee wants to hear about the fraud. They do not need the family melodrama. I looked at the statement they had drafted for me. It was 5 pages of double-spaced text, sanitized to the point of sterility. It described irregularities and misappropriated funds. It mentioned my father, Hank Coleman, 18 times. It mentioned Graham Merrick 0 times. I pushed the paper away. This is not what happened, I said. It is what we can prove, Marcus countered, his patience fraying. We have the invoices. We have the forged signature. We have a clear line of guilt to your father. If we start dragging in lobbyists and state officials without a paper trail, the defense will eat you alive. They will paint you as a conspiracy theorist. I looked at Senator Whitfield. She was sitting at the head of the table, scrolling through her tablet. She hadn't looked up in 20 minutes. Senator, I said. She paused, lifting her eyes. They were cool, detached. Yes. Hazel, your team wants me to bury my father. I said, they want me to say he was the architect. He signed the checks. Hazel, he was the glove. I snapped. Graham Merrick was the hand inside it. If I go out there and say Hank Coleman was the mastermind, Merrick walks away. He finds another desperate contractor, another failing business, and he starts the machine up again next week. Whitfield set her tablet down. We take the win we can get. Hazel, we indict the contractor. We show the voters we are cleaning up the city. Then, we use the momentum to launch the task force. That is how change happens. Incrementally. I felt a cold realization settle in my gut. You are protecting him, I said. The room went silent. Marcus stopped clicking his pen. Whitfield's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. I am protecting the investigation, she said smoothly. Graham Merrick has friends in this building, powerful friends. If we aim at him and miss, the backlash will wipe out everything, including you. She leaned forward. Stick to the script. Hazel, name your father. Validate the forgery. Take your win. Do not be a martyr. I looked at the script. It was a lie. Not a lie of commission, but a lie of omission. It was a story where the little guy gets crushed and the system stays intact. I stood up. I need a break. I said. I walked out before they could stop me. I needed to breathe air that hadn't been recycled through a political filter. I found my brother in the parking garage. Luke was leaning against the concrete wall, smoking a cigarette, a habit he had quit 3 years ago. He looked like he had aged a decade in a week. His work boots were scuffed, his jeans stained with oil. He didn't look like a foreman anymore. He looked like a survivor of a shipwreck. He saw me and flicked the cigarette away. "Hey, Hayes," he said. I walked over and hugged him. He felt thin, rigid. "How is he?" I asked. Hank had surrendered the day before. He was currently in the county lockup, awaiting arraignment. He is quiet," Luke said. "He told me to sell the tools, said we wouldn't need them anymore. I pulled back. We will figure it out." Luke shook his head. He reached into his jacket, the heavy canvas Carhartt he wore in all weather. "I found something," he said. He pulled out a manila folder. It was stained with coffee rings and grease. "The repo guys came for the truck on Tuesday," he said. "I cleaned it out before they took it. I found this shoved up under the plastic liner of the center console. You know that loose panel where he used to hide his emergency cash? I took the folder. It wasn't official paperwork. It was a collection of napkins, torn envelopes, and backs of receipts. I opened it. My father's handwriting was jagged. Rushed. June 12th, diner on 4th. Meeting with GM, wants 10,000 cash. Said the inspector will look the other way. August 4th, M. Called. Said the tunnel bid is fixed. Need to hire his safety guy. 5,000 a month. October 1st. Told Ma I want out. He mentioned Hazel. Asked if she still lived on Elm Street. Said accidents happen. I stared at the notes. These weren't the polished ledgers my mother had kept. These were the panicked scribblings of a man who knew he was drowning. He had documented his own extortion. He kept them. Luke whispered. All this time. He knew they were screwing him, and he wrote it down. Why didn't he give this to his lawyer? I asked. Because he is scared. Hayes. He thinks if he produces this, Merrick will hurt us. He thinks silence is the only shield he has left. I closed the folder. I held it against my chest. This changes everything. I said, this isn't just fraud. This is racketeering. This proves coercion. Luke looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. Use it. Hazel. Please, don't let them make him out to be the devil. He was weak. Yeah, but he wasn't the devil. I put the folder in my bag. I promise. I said. I went to the jail that night. It took 3 hours to get approval. My protected cooperator status got me past the front desk. But the bureaucracy of the county jail was stubborn. Finally, they led me to a visitation room. It was divided by thick glass. Hank Coleman walked in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. He looked small. The bluster, the rage, the physical presence that had dominated my childhood, it was all gone. He sat down and picked up the phone. I picked up mine. You shouldn't be here, he said. His voice was tinny through the receiver. I needed to see you. Dad. He looked at my face, searching for something, maybe anger, maybe pity. I heard you are testifying tomorrow. He said, yes. Are you going to tell them about the dinner? He asked. About what I called you? I nodded. It is part of the story. Dad. He looked down at the metal counter. I deserve it, he murmured. I deserve whatever you say. I pressed my hand against the glass. Dad, look at me. He looked up. I am not doing this to hurt you. I said, and I am not doing it to save you. I am doing it because Mom started it. And I am going to finish it. He flinched at the mention of my mother. She knew. He whispered, she knew everything. She saved us. Dad, her ledger is the reason we have a chance. He nodded slowly. She was always the strong one. I just wanted to build things. I just wanted to be a big shot. Dad, listen to me. Luke gave me the notes from the truck. His eyes went wide. Panic flared. Burn them. Hazel, burn them now. No, I said firmly. Hazel, you don't understand. Merrick can't touch us if the lights are on. Dad, I interrupted, my voice rising. That is what you never understood. You thought the darkness protected you. It didn't. It hid him. I leaned close to the glass. I'm turning the lights on. All of them. He stared at me. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving under the orange fabric. But then, the panic began to recede. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw that I wasn't the scared little girl at the dinner table anymore. I wasn't the daughter he had to protect by pushing away. "You are going to fight him," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am going to audit him." I said, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You and your paperwork," he said softly. He placed his hand on the glass, opposite mine. "Give him hell. Hazel, I will." The morning of the hearing was gray and rainy, the kind of weather that made the marble buildings of the Capitol look like mausoleums. I stood in the prep room, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Marcus, the consultant, had brought me a navy blue dress. He said it looked sympathetic but professional. I left it on the hanger. I put on my own suit, a sharp charcoal gray blazer and tailored trousers. I put on the pearls I had bought myself. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like an analyst. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a text from Tessa Vale. "Alert. Merrick's people are pushing a counter-story to the press right now. They are claiming you forged the memo." I stared at the screen. "They are saying you were bitter about your father cutting you off financially. They say you used your access at Veracity Health to plant the documents to frame him and the consulting firm. They are calling it a daughter's revenge." My hand shook. It was brilliant. It was evil. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to nullify me. If they could paint me as a disgruntled, vindictive daughter who knew how to manipulate compliance logs, then my testimony wasn't evidence. It was a vendetta. They were attacking my credibility. The one thing I valued more than anything. I looked at the mirror again. My skin looked pale. My eyes looked wide. If I went out there and read the sanitized statement Whitfield had prepared, I would play right into their hands. The statement focused on Hank. It made me look like I was piling on. It made me look exactly like the bitter daughter they were painting me to be. I realized then that the script wasn't just safe. It was a trap. There was a knock at the door. "Time, Hazel." Marcus called out. I grabbed my bag. I grabbed the folder with Hank's notes. I grabbed the script. I walked out. The corridor was a gauntlet of noise. Cameras clicked like a swarm of cicadas. Reporters shouted questions I couldn't distinguish. I saw Senator Whitfield at the end of the hall. She was standing in a pool of light, speaking to a news crew. She looked poised, serious, the very image of justice. She saw me coming. She stopped talking and turned to the camera, gesturing toward me. "And here is our key witness," she said, "a brave young woman who chose integrity over loyalty." She smiled at me. For a split second, I couldn't tell if she was proud of me or if she was proud of the headline she was about to create. She didn't look at me like a person. She looked at me like a winning lottery ticket. She didn't know about Tessa's text. Or maybe she did, and she didn't care. Maybe she figured that even if I was discredited, the scandal would still be enough to launch her task force. I walked past her. I didn't smile back. I entered the hearing room. It was cavernous. The ceiling was high, adorned with murals of industry and law. The committee members sat on a raised dais, looking down like gods in business suits. The gallery was packed. I walked to the witness table. There was a single microphone, a pitcher of water, and a nameplate. Ms. Hazel Coleman. I sat down. The chair was hard. I looked out at the room. And then I saw him, Graham Merrick. He was standing at the very back of the room, near the exit doors. He wasn't hiding. He was watching. He wore the same calm expression he had worn in the lobby. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. It was a message. "I am here. I am watching. Remember the mortgage. Remember the counter-story." My hands started to shake, a violent tremor that rattled the papers on the table. Fear. It washed over me, cold and suffocating. The same fear I felt when Hank shouted. The same fear I felt when I saw the note on my car. I looked down at the script Marcus had written. "My name is Hazel Coleman. I am here to testify regarding the activities of Coleman Contracting. It was safe. It was easy. If I read this, I walked away. Maybe Merrick would let it go. Maybe I would get that job on the task force. But then I thought about the word worthless. Merrick thought I was worthless. He thought I was a variable he could zero out with a press release. My mother hadn't spent 20 years hiding ledgers for me to be safe. She had done it for me to be dangerous. I looked at Merrick again. He looked confident, and suddenly, the shaking stopped, because I realized something. He wasn't there to intimidate me. He was there to see if his intimidation had worked. He was there because he was anxious. Fear is information. If he was afraid of me, then I had power. The chairman of the committee, a white-haired man with a gavel, tapped the wood. The committee will come to order. We are here to hear the testimony of Ms. Hazel Coleman. He looked down at me over his spectacles. Ms. Coleman, please state your name for the record and proceed with your opening statement. I leaned into the microphone. The room went silent. The buzz of the cameras seemed to fade. I looked at the script one last time. Then, I slid it to the side. I looked up. I didn't look at the chairman. I looked directly at the camera lens in the center of the aisle. My name is Hazel Coleman, I said. My voice was clear, steady, and 3 weeks ago, at a Sunday dinner, my father called me worthless. A murmur rippled through the room. This wasn't the standard opening. He called me worthless. I continued, because he wanted to make me small. He wanted to silence me, because in his world, and in the world of the men who own him, silence is the currency. I saw Whitfield stiffen in her peripheral vision. She leaned forward, her eyes wide. I am a compliance analyst. I said, my job is to look at systems and find the breaking points. We are here today to talk about a broken system. But if we only talk about my father, Hank Coleman, we are lying to you. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the stained, coffee-ringed folder Luke had given me. I held it up. My father is not the architect of this fraud. I said, he is the product of it. Mr. Chairman! A lawyer from the sidelines jumped up. Objection. This evidence was not submitted in discovery. The chairman banged his gavel. Ms. Coleman, you must stick to the submitted statement. The room buzzed louder. Merrick shifted at the back of the room, his stillness breaking. I didn't stop. I didn't look at the chairman. This folder contains handwritten notes, I said, my voice rising over the noise. Notes documenting 10 years of extortion. Notes documenting payments not just to shell companies, but to the intermediaries who control them. I opened the folder. August 4th. I read, meeting with Graham Merrick. The name hit the room like a grenade. The gasp was audible. Mr. Chairman, the lawyer screamed. She is out of order. I kept reading. $5,000 a month for safety consulting. If payment is missed, threats are made against the family. I looked up. I looked straight at Merrick. He had turned pale. He was backing toward the door. We are told that corruption is just greedy men skimming off the top. I said, but it isn't. It is a coercion pipeline. It turns fathers into hostages and daughters into leverage. Ms. Coleman. The chairman was standing now. Silence, or I will have you removed. I stood up too. I will not be silent, I shouted, my voice cracking with the sheer force of the truth. I picked up the folder. They tried to say I forged the documents. They tried to say I was a bitter daughter, but you cannot forge fear. You cannot forge 20 years of a mother hiding ledgers in a recipe book because she was terrified her husband would be killed. I looked at Whitfield. She was staring at me, her face a mask of shock, and was it respect? Senator Whitfield wanted me to give you a clean story. I said to the room, she wanted a villain you could arrest easily. But the truth is messy. The truth is that my father is guilty, but the man who holds his leash is standing at the back of this room. Every head in the chamber turned. Merrick was frozen, his hand on the door handle. The cameras swiveled. The flashbulbs erupted like lightning. I pointed at him. His name is Graham Merrick, and he called me worthless, too. Merrick opened the door and ran. The room erupted into chaos. Reporters were shouting. The chairman was banging the gavel so hard it sounded like gunshots. I stood there in the center of the storm. I looked down at the empty table where the script had been. I felt light, weightless. I had burned down the family business. I had implicated my father. I had defied a senator. I had made an enemy of a powerful lobbyist. But for the first time in 33 years, I was writing the story. I looked at the camera again. My name is Hazel Coleman, I said into the hot mic, before they cut the feed, and I am valuable. The weeks that followed were a blur of depositions, subpoenas, and security details. Merrick was arrested at the airport 3 hours after the hearing. The notes in the folder, combined with my mother's ledgers, provided the roadmap the FBI needed. They didn't just get him for fraud. They got him for racketeering. Hank pleaded guilty. He got 3 years. He is in a minimum security facility upstate. I visit him on Sundays. We don't talk about the business. We talk about books. He is reading a lot now. He says it's quiet in there. Luke moved 3 states away. He needed to start over, away from the Coleman name. We text. It's slow, but we are rebuilding. Senator Whitfield got her task force. She took credit for the breakthrough in the investigation. I didn't take the job she offered. I went back to Veracity Health. I sit in my cubicle, I drink my coffee, and I audit the systems. But things are different now. When I walk down the street, I don't check my reflection to see if I'm blending in. I don't rehearse scripts in my car. I kept the recipe binder. It sits on my shelf, next to the photos of my mother. Sometimes, when the city is quiet. I drive past the harbor tunnel. I look at the concrete and the steel, the infrastructure that holds us all up. I think about the secrets buried in the foundation, and I think about the dinner. It was the worst night of my life, but it was also the beginning, because if he hadn't called me worthless, I never would have found out what I was worth. Thank you for listening to My Dad Called Me Worthless at Dinner. The senator asked to meet me. This story was a journey into the shadows of family loyalty and the high cost of the truth. I hope Hazel's fight for her dignity resonated with you. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. Did you agree with Hazel's decision to go off script? Would you have protected your father? Or burned the system down? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more dramas about justice, betrayal, and the power of reclaiming your narrative. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time.